and welcome. I'm just checking to see if I am live. And as always, if you can see me, please shout out so that I can say hello and acknowledge you. So, I'm continuing with the book reading of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And tonight we're going to talk about what he has written in chapter 8, which is decision, the mastery of procrastination, the seventh step towards riches. So we're now on the seventh step to create riches in your life. And this is all about the importance of making decisions. Now, firstly, I'd love to do a poll and I'd love to hear your answer here. Who here has ever procrastinated? Now, I like to think I'm efficient and effective and I do things all the time, but I have this, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've got this giant jigsaw puzzle that is behind me. And that's what I do when I procrastinate. Now, I tell myself all sorts of reasons about how it's relaxing. And hubby's just telling me that it's working, that he can hear the sound, which is all very good. So hubby tells me that my jigsaw puzzle is a time waster. I like to say that it's relaxing, that it helps with my brain and my problem solving skill. There's some theories about it linking the left and right side of the brain and doing all sorts of amazing things in terms of problem solving skills. But to be honest, usually when I'm doing my jigsaw puzzle, it's because I'm procrastinating, and I'm usually procrastinating from doing something that I don't want to do, such as writing an article about something that I don't really want to write, usually a freelance writing article or something else. And it's no surprise that usually often the biggest procrastinators tend to be students who are procrastinating for doing things like writing of an exam, preparing for a presentation, or studying for an exam, because they're things often we don't want to do, we're scared of doing, there's a potentially bad outcome, so we're putting it off. And so it's all really fascinating stuff. Now, Napoleon Hill has this very long winded chapter here, and most of what's in the chapter actually has nothing to do with decision making or procrastination. He actually has a very unusual case study here, from our standards anyway, which would resonate perhaps more with his 1930s readership in America. It doesn't resonate so much with a 2020 audience in Australia. So, just that word of warning before you get into it. And that's because most of this chapter is taken up with the history of the War of Independence in the US. Now, having recently, as in earlier this year, back in February, watched that movie with Mel Gibson, what is it, The Patriot, I think, all about US guerrillas warfare people, what are they called? People who were not the traditional army in the War of Independence, and being very pro US and anti British. I perhaps have a little bit more background in the back of my head with this, but it is fairly detailed. So, those who've gone through a US school system, who know the history of the War of Independence with great detail, this is a story that will really resonate. But for everyone else, it's largely a lot of facts and a lot of dates, and it doesn't make so much sense. But the basic premise of this, if you're interested, is that a number of people in that movement earlier on, and this is before the declaration was signed on July the 4th, 1776, so 4th of July. So before that, I think it's 52 people signed this important declaration, the Declaration of Independence. Before that was signed, there were a number of things that took place leading up to it in those couple of years, and it involved a number of individual people, especially Samuel Adams and John Hancock, making decisions based on courage, the decisions to forge towards this independence movement, which could easily have cost them their lives. In fact, a lot of people did stake their lives on this. So the central sorts of themes with these things are actually not so much about decision making, so much as courage, so much as masterminding, like banding together with people with like-minded thoughts, and having this conviction, this definiteness of purpose. So those are the kinds of themes. Now, I find this a bit odd with Hill. Every time he has a chapter on a particular topic, he tends to borrow from the topics that are about to come or the topics that have yet to come. Particularly, he tends to spend most of a particular chapter talking about the next chapter rather than the current chapter. And this is no exception. So, do read this chapter 8 if you like, but be prepared that most of it is based on a history lesson. But let's go back and talk then instead of the importance of reaching decisions promptly. Now, someone once said to me, it might even have been my dear dad, who's full of wisdom, that not making a decision is a decision. So not making a decision is a decision. And I'm sure we all know a boss who's like that. I've had several in my career. They don't want to make a decision because the decision's too hard. You need their approval to do something. So they keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And in the end, that is the decision. But it becomes complex and it becomes difficult. It doesn't make the decision making process easier. It just puts off them making a hard decision and sort of puts it back on other people. But it doesn't actually solve the problem. And in the end, it's actually a decision of itself. So Hill instead says that of the many people he had studied who had accumulated great fortunes, that every one of them had the habit of reaching decisions promptly and of changing these decisions slowly, if and when they were changed. People who fail to accumulate money without exception have the habit of reaching decisions, if at all, very slowly and of changing these decisions quickly and often. He then gives the example of Henry Ford, who had the reputation as being obstinate, because basically Henry Ford said, I'm going to design one car, and that's the Model T, the world's ugliest car. And even though all of his advisors said, don't do it, he said, I want this and I'm not going to change my mind. So this is actually touches on a really interesting thing, and something that as a writer and an author is something that is much to my it's something that I wrestle with all the time. You need to have this definiteness of purpose, and you need to believe in yourself, and you need to follow what you think is right. Now, of course, you need to listen to other inputs, and you need to listen to other opinions. I'm currently on a course with the Canberra Innovation Network at the moment, which is basically like a lean startup course. This morning we were talking about the concierge method, the minimum viable product method, which is all about seeking people's input and, doing a sort of like a low fidelity kind of design. So doing like a mock up of your idea and seeking lots of views on this design before you move forward, rather than just producing something like the Model T and just hoping people would buy it. So this chapter seems to be completely in reverse to, what I was doing, learning on this course this morning. So I find this all really fascinating. And I guess too, as an author, what happens often is you'll write something, you write a chapter, you write an article, and then you send it out to various people for opinion. And a lot of people will come back with an opinion, too much detail, not enough detail, include this, take out this. And it can really be overwhelming. Like it can be overwhelming, to be honest, to the point of um, actually stymieing your creativity. Back in 2015, I was chosen to be part of an ACT Writers Centre course called Hard Copy. It was an exclusive course that had in our intake had 26 people from around Australia that were on that particular course. It was an honour to be in that course. And at the end of that process, we had a weekend where I got 10 literary agents and publishers from out Australia, some of the best in Australia, give me critique on my manuscript. So I think it was a couple of chapters and an introduction from memory. And it was very interesting. But as a result of that process, I was so stymied that I couldn't even look at my manuscript for 6 months. It was such an intense process. So when I came away from that, I actually made a decision for a while that I would go la 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 la. I wouldn't go to any kind of literary events for a while. I wouldn't read too many other books on finance for a while. I would just kind of ignore some input for a while and I would write. And I had to do that because if I would listen to all of that input, I just would lose so much self confidence that I wouldn't have done this. Now, this isn't to say that I don't take different ideas on board, because certainly I did through the editing process, but there has to be a fine line there between being receptive and open to listening to customer input, but also having the courage of your own self-belief. And this is really what Hill talks about here. And he is more firmly in make your decision, trust your instinct, follow your own self-belief kind of camp. And he says opinions. Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them. If you are influenced by opinions when you reach decisions, you will not succeed in any undertaking, much less that of transmuting your own desire into money. So this is really interesting. So if you are influenced by the opinions of others, you have no desire of your own. I get where he's coming from. You have to still keep your self-belief. This is particularly hard often for a lot of women, but it is, I think, also important not to be completely obstinate and completely dog-headed, because you can lose a lot of money if you go into business and you don't listen to other people, particularly your customers. You have to really be able to observe what your customers want and to listen to them. Hello, lovely Sylvia. How are you? We're talking about Chapter 8 of Procrastination and Decision Making, and currently I've been talking a little bit about the balance between listening to opinions and feedback of others and then following your own will and not being swayed by it. So Hill then goes on and talks about close friends and relatives and their opinions of what you're doing. Now, I don't know about you, Sylvia, or others who are watching, but my close friends and family, they often think I'm nuts when I come up with a new idea. And I've learnt now to just kind of do it and just hope for the best. Because usually when I come up with something, I say, oh, that'll never make money, or, oh, how have you got time for that? Or don't be crazy, someone else is doing it. There'll be a whole range of different things. So Hill says close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule, which is meant to be humorous. Oh, have I been the brunt of ridicule? Ha, Miss Frugal is. Everyone loves in my family to make fun of me being frugal, but it's funny because when there's contributions for things like gifts for birthdays, I'm usually the one who gives the most. And even my dad now says, you're surprisingly generous. But that's just the way it is. He also cautions people to talk too much about their ideas. So rather than sort of going, yeah, this is my greatest innovation, this is my greatest idea, and I'm going to talk about it, he says a lot of people do too much talking and too little listening. Keep your eyes and ears wide open and your mouth closed if you wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision. So he says that genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. So to be the one in the room who is listening rather than always talking. Now, this is an important thing, but I would also add that for women, we are socialized often to be the quiet one sitting in the corner at the room. And there is a great need from leadership point of view for women to be seen and heard. I compare this to the magic of thinking big approach, which is always to sit in the front row, say if there's a lecture, for instance, and ask questions loudly. And particularly if there's a meeting, to make sure always that you ask at least one question in a meeting. And I do try and do this as a woman, not always. Some days I'm like, I'm just going to have a bit of, a relax, and I'm not going to stretch myself too far, to be honest, if I'm having a bit of an off day. Shouldn't say that too loudly. But usually I make a point of asking at least one question or saying at least one thing, particularly if I'm something like a board meeting, because I'm on one particular board. I think it's really important for me as a woman to be there and to be visible. But be careful what you say, because it's really important because your words transmute who you are. And so he does actually warn about that, if you open your mouth and you say something stupid, then people are going to judge you for that. Yvette says, I like that advice, but yes, Lean In book encourages women to always have a go. Yeah, Yvette, exactly. And it's important to recognize that Think and Grow Rich was written by a man for men. So he's assuming certain things such as, working hard is going to be recognized, and taking on lots of extra jobs is going to be recognized. Being silent and listening is going to be recognized. With women, it's not always the same, and it's really important to think of that gendered approach. People could just assume you're just a secretary. I mean, secretaries are important. I have to be careful what I say here. But, if you want to be a credible player at the table, it's important that you say something. And it's important also that you say things that are actually because women have this tendency sometimes, or I have this tendency to think out loud, oh, I wonder if this, do we do this? No, you've really got to think and say something short, to the point, and something that's intelligent, which is really quite important. So that is it. And then like I said, he goes on to this long story that goes back and forth about the Declaration of Independence. But he does have in this a few decent quotes too at the end. Those who reach decisions promptly and definitely know what they want and generally get it. The leaders in every walk of life decide quickly and firmly. That is the major reason why they are leaders. The world has the habit of making room for the man whose words and actions show that he knows where he's going. I think that is true. Leadership is about definiteness of action and about being prepared to make that decision rather than just making a decision by not making a decision. That said, it is important if clearly a decision has been wrong for various reasons, such as changing circumstance, that there has to be room to revisit that decision and to amend it. So that is an important thing that also needs to be taken into account. Financial independence, riches, desirable business, and professional positions are not within reach of the person who neglects or refuses to expect, to plan and demand these things, i.e., definiteness of decision. So you have to have that courage, particularly when you want to be very wealthy. You have to have that courage to make the definiteness of the decision of what you want and to go to it. So this is pretty much what he says on procrastination and making a decision. And like I said earlier, I'm a little bit disappointed because most of this chapter was taken up on discussion about the Declaration of Independence and the history that went towards that. And while it's a story of great courage, it's not really a story that I think is one about overcoming procrastination. Now, procrastination is an interesting thing. Some people say that psychologically it's not a bad thing because, I guess, from an evolutionary perspective, we didn't want to be running around and doing a whole lot of things that we were scared about, like, oh, let's go and fight a tiger. Yeah, let's just run out without preparation. So procrastination is our brain's way of saying, oh, danger, 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 something unpleasant. Let's just, hang back a bit and, be a bit prepared and think it through. But what procrastination does is it holds us back. It holds us back in so many ways. And so many people I know of who are incredibly talented and brilliant and could do amazing things are often stopping from starting in launching a new venture or a side hustle or writing a book or developing a course or doing a whole range of things because they're scared. It's the same thing of students who are not writing their essay early. They're doing it because they're scared. They're scared they're not going to do it well. They're scared they're going to fail. So it's like a law of attraction thing. You're scared of something. You're scared you're not going to do it well. You're scared you're not going to do it on time. You're scared you're not going to get a good grade. So therefore, that's what you manifest. So I think it's really important to recognize that decisiveness and having a go and being willing to take those risks and to exercise some personal courage and initiative are really important traits for successful people. Notwithstanding the fact there's a little bit of gendered advice with this, it still goes for men or women, that when you know what you want to do and you're prepared to take that risk to have a go at it and you do it quickly, this is really important. I had a good discussion with April Mack before, who I know has been on here previously twice as guests on the Friday Power Up series, and she talks about how it's good to have as least a gap as possible between your initial idea and when you implement it, because you're still excited about this idea, right? You come up with an idea for a new book or, I don't know, a new side hustle, and you're still excited and you're in that glow and you haven't yet got into that talking yourself out of it self-doubt phase. So you just sort of go for it. And then when you go for it, you get some quick wins and you get some good feedback. And you sort of go, oh, it's actually not as scary as I thought it was. Everyone isn't going to laugh at me. It's fine. And so I think that's really important to recognize this, that, when we're doing something new, something that's a bit that there could be some failure with it. You're not just sitting doing the same thing you've been doing every day. You're doing something a little bit different. There is that feeling of uncomfortableness. As my friend Leanne Elliott said to me recently, in a way, it's our body's way of wanting to bring us back to autopilot. So you can imagine that our body is like an automatic driving car. It's going on autopilot all the time. It's doing things a certain way. It's always used to driving in a certain direction, going somewhere else. And suddenly you take it off autopilot and you say, I'm driving now. And rather than going to the city to work every day, we're heading to Melbourne. they'll go, whoa, that's not where I want to go. Let's go back. And so you're going to feel this sort of discomfort. So just recognize that that's what you're going to be feeling, but it's really important to overcome that by doing it. And you will feel so much relief once you get started. I was procrastinating yesterday, last night. No, I never procrastinate, but I was really procrastinating with writing an article that I didn't really want to write. Now, it's a long story and I won't tell you which article, but the relationship with that particular editor hasn't always been super fantastic, although sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not. I didn't really like the topic of the article and I was scared about it because sometimes I get trolled by some people when I write certain things. And I was just feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. So I left it to the last possible minute. Like it was due at 5 o'clock. I think I started at about 7:30. So, which is not really like me because I'd actually written several others for the same publication early, right? So I had two due that day and I'd written about three of them early, but this one I was scared about, so I left it. So just to recognize that these problems, they don't go away. So the more worried you are about this article you don't want to write, this exam you don't want to prepare for, this difficult conversation you've got to have with someone, that problem isn't going to go away until you actually do that. So the best gift you can give to yourself is to get in there and do it. Now it's going to feel uncomfortable, it's going to feel weird, but you are going to feel so much better once you do that. Once you get over that hurdle, it's going to be like, whoa, what took me so long? And then you'll feel like you can accomplish anything pretty much. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say tonight in terms of chapter 8, overcoming procrastination. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. But the best way to really overcome procrastination is just to follow a Nike slogan and just do it. Seriously, to take that imperfect action and get in there and start, because there's never going to be a perfect time for things to be done. There's never going to be a perfect way. You will learn by doing things, especially if it's something new. There's a theory that it takes about 10,000 hours to learn a new skill. I think the science behind that is a bit, dodgy because it obviously depends. Some languages, for instance, are easier to learn than other languages. Some levels of fitness are harder than others. But certainly, the more you do about something, the more you will learn. The first initial attempts at things are often not as good as you think, but it gets better. Thank you very much, Yvette. I really appreciate you tuning in and hope everything is well. From memory, you're in Melbourne and hope everything is getting better down there. It looks like the COVID cases are reducing. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to hearing from those who watch on replay and in the comments whether this has helped you overcome any form of procrastination, to make a decision on something, to move forward from something, and to just keep going. Thank you very much.